Welcome to Inspirational Journeys, everyone. My name is Ann Harrison, and today my special guest, Temple Kinyon, was recommended to me. She reached out to me through, introduced to me rather, through a previous guest, Susan Johnson. And so, first of all, I want to give Susan a shout out for connecting us, and second of all, I want to say welcome to the show, Temple.
Thank you for having me. And yes, thank you to Susan. I am just thrilled to be here, Anne. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. So, why don't you start by introducing yourself?
Well, again, my name is Temple Kinyon, and I am a freelance writer, which encompasses a lot of fun stuff, writing articles for magazines and doing some editing for people, copywriting, that type of thing. And then I am also an author of the book, The Button Boxes. And I self-published that book in September of 2019. It's a middle grade fiction book about Andy, who receives a couple of old wooden boxes filled with old buttons from his grandma Lois on his 12th birthday. And he's very skeptical, like, what is a 12-year-old kid going to do with old boxes and buttons, right? But his grandma assures him that every button has a story to tell him about his family history. And he kind of blows her off and thinks she's a little bit crazy. But in the end, Andy has to use these buttons to determine if they have some sort of key to helping his grandma when she is struck ill and rushed to the hospital. So it's in his hands because he's the only one that knows about the buttons. So,
Mm,
yeah.
yes, I love the book. I absolutely do. I cannot give it any more high recommendation than that. I absolutely loved it. It was hard to put down.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna ask you a question. We talked about this, via email beforehand, but
Sure.
how did you know when God called you to be a writer?
Well, I'm glad we kind of chatted ahead of time because this is not an easy question to answer because I wasn't that person that woke up one day as a kid and I want to be a writer. I never as a kid I loved writing, and I was so very blessed to have very nurturing and creative and talented teachers in grade school and junior high and high school that encouraged my creativity. And I loved writing and I did okay. I actually won a couple competitions in high school. But when I went into college, I decided to major in communication and advertising. So a little bit of writing sort of, but more along the creative lines of that type of thing. And um ultimately, my main career ended up being in event planning, which I loved, but I always had that thought in the back of my head, is what I'm doing, does it matter? Is like, what's the long term of these wonderful events that we're doing? And yes, you can always justify your job, but there was always that that it wasn't quite the right fit for me. And I finally sort of hit a wall, got burnt out, rearranged my life a little. My husband, of course, was very supportive of all of this and started working part time, but focused on my writing. And it felt right. And I just thought, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But it wasn't until I wrote the button boxes and put it out to publishers and agents, and got miserably declined from everyone. No one wanted it, right? And so I went into this kind of funk, like questioning, am I supposed to be doing this? What am I doing? Why am I doing this? Why don't I just go back to the full-time job and just give it up, right?
Mhm.
But my friend called me, a really good friend called me. His name's Cameron. And I believe that God puts the right people in front of you at the right time.
Mhm.
And he said, dude, it's a great book. My kids read it, loved it. Publish it. Who cares if it's a bestseller? Who cares if some big name picks it up? It's your story and you want to share it. And at that moment, I hung up the phone that day and I had this overwhelming sense of calm and direction and conviction and confidence, which I hadn't had. And I thought, he's right. What am I doing waiting? So I went out on KDP and Amazon and I self-published. I had a great illustrator for my cover and she also put it together for me. And I I did not look back. That was when I knew God was like, this is what you need to be doing. And however you do it, you're going to be creating and using words for a living. And that was it. That's how I knew I was on the right path. And it has always been that way from that point forward. Even when it's hard and I don't want to do it and I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, I get that voice in the back of my head that says, "Yep, keep going. You're not alone. I'm with you." And so it has just been a wonderful experience for me.
Wow, I love that because again, in Habakkuk 2, and I'm not going to read the whole verse, but part of that verse that really keeps coming back to me, and God tells you to write the vision and make it plain.
Yes.
And
Isn't that
that's what you did.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's important people the big thing was is I just felt so alone in that dark place. I knew I'd be okay and I wasn't depressed or anything, but just feeling so rejected by all those agents and everything. And they were right. I mean, they're experts in their industry too. It probably wouldn't have, been a huge seller, but that just makes you feel really bad about yourself when everybody
Mhm.
says no. But, God didn't say no. He said yes. And I took it from there and I know this is the right journey and the right path for me.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
to be honest, sometimes you get no's. It's not that they don't want that you're not good. It's that the book is not what they want and it's not for them.
Yeah.
So, you kind of have to move on or do it yourself. So, tell me about the process behind this book. Did you outline it or did you just start right by the seat of your pants? How did that work?
Oh, yeah, pretty much. No, I'd never taken on a big project like a book, right? But this
Yeah.
again, I had this wonderful idea, from my mother-in-law that sparked the button boxes, about buttons having stories. Buttons are on our clothes and they witness what we're doing, right? And so they hold those stories just like our brains do or our eyes take it in. So that's kind of the inspiration behind it, and it just spoke to me and I just started writing. Of course, I wrote it as a 12-year-old boy, which I am not. So I had to do some, researching and interviewing and trying to get that right voice.
Mhm.
Um, as far as a process is concerned, I did use a real basic outline to start. But for me, the best thing to do when I'm writing fiction is to just do the vomit draft, is what I call it. I did not coin that phrase. I got it from a
Oh no,
memoir.
I know. I've heard it.
Yeah, so, you just get it all out, right? You type it all out or
Mhm.
write it all out, get it all out. Then you start to build around those basic concepts of the story. And so that's what I did, and I had to do a little research. There's some actual historical references in the book, and so I had to research Civil War and a couple of other things that are referred to, and that's really important that you get that right, so I did that, and, I just refined and refined. And you as a writer can appreciate this and the writer listeners you have, you can never get it perfect, right?
Right.
You're always going to go back and read it that you and find something that you would change. So you have to
Mhm.
at some point stop and say, this is as well of a, this is as good as it's going to get. And then you ask other people in. You get beta readers, you get a good editor to make sure all those mechanics are right and the spelling and structure and everything's right. And then you get that feedback and you build from that, but not, you got to be pretty much finished to get to this point. And then you just determine what you want to do. Do you want to put it out to a publisher or find an agent to represent you, or do you want to publish it yourself? The most important part of my writing process is that percolation. Like you work all day and then you put it away for the evening until the next day, or you work for a couple hours and then you let it sit for a couple of hours, and that lets that creative part of your brain reset. So that's one key thing that I always do as part of my process, is build in that time to percolate the story and get it to its most perfect form.
Mhm. That is so true.
Yeah.
Um, And I love that. And I love that concept that every button has a story.
I do too. Isn't that fun?
Uh-huh. We may not we may never see the stories like Andy did, but it's just interesting because
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great concept. My mother-in-law she's a quilter, and so we were sitting in her quilting room one day, and she envisioned it like as a 1800s seamstress person reusing these buttons on other clothing items, and the buttons would reveal these stories in her brain. And I just took it from there and modernized it a little bit, and turned it into a 12-year-old boy, Andy. And I fully intend on having more button box adventures. Now, whether
oh,
they'll be a series of short stories or whether they'll be in another book, but it was definitely written as to be a series. So those
I
will
love that.
coincide with some of my current projects.
Yeah, let me know when the next one comes out because I want to read it.
Well, thank you. I will. I
Yeah.
will.
And it's like, you kind of when you said that, you kind of made me think of something. Um, as writers, our characters speak to us. So it would not surprise me if a button doesn't start speaking to a writer and yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
would not surprise me because things
Yeah.
what would most people would think are inanimate objects do speak to us in some way.
Yeah, it's a great concept for a book.
Mhm.
And when I go on my signings, a lot of times I have an old wooden box and I fill it with all these old buttons. Most people I know collect buttons or save buttons, you know. And when when kids go by, they play with the buttons and they touch them and look at them and feel them, and it's a very tactile thing. And I always say, you can take a button and write a story about it, and they light up. And I don't know if I'm always like, share your story. And of course, nobody ever has, but just that creative juice behind that look, you can tell that the wheels in their mind are thinking, what does this button say? And where was this button? So it's kind of a fun, creative idea. And you could use anything, anybody could write a story about, furniture speaking, and maybe it's haunted or something. I don't know, but it's a great concept, and I am running with it because people relate to buttons in a
Yeah,
very simple way because they wear clothing with buttons on them.
right, and I like to crochet, so my crochet toys come to life, and I've
There
got some
you
I've got some fantasy chapter books that are kind of put to the side so I can finish this one series,
go. Mhm.
but my crochet toys come to life for me.
It's they all witness what we're doing, right?
Right. Now I can see my hands in a box of buttons. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a really cool thing, and people
Mhm.
relate to it. A lot of my readers are not middle graders, I do have a lot of young readers that reach out, but a lot of my readers are adults, and they can relate because there's history in it, and it's a family kind of relational thing. No matter what your family looks like, however you define family, there's a concept in that book that you could relate to. So, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It really does have a good concept.
Thanks.
So, um I want to kind of pick your brain now since you're a freelance writer. How did you get started with that on that journey?
That again, I think was one of those God things, the right people at the right time saying the
Mhm.
right things. Like I said earlier, I kind of hit a wall in my career. I absolutely loved what I was doing, but it was just I just had burnout. And so rearranged the life so that I could work part-time and bring in a little bit of money, but focus on the writing. And I saw an ad in the paper. Um, I think it was the paper or maybe a local magazine for a space that you could rent, basically rent a desk kind of thing. But it was a space that was very creative. And these two women had put together, there was an old house downtown. I live in Las Vegas. Downtown, there's a lot of these great old houses that were built in like the 40s and 50s.
Oh
And
wow.
they had redone this building. So it was still old and kind of cool and kitschy, but there were several offices that were sort of made. And they had rented one of the back bedrooms, and they were both they're both writers. One of them's a very accomplished illustrator. They're very creative people. And so they were just like, you can pay a fee and use one of the desks in our room. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do because I was afraid working at home would be too distracting since this was the first time that I had not had an office to go to.
Mhm.
And so through that connection, I started writing a magazine article, which never got published, but it was a good exercise for me. And I met the publisher of Boulevard's magazine, who also had office space there. And then they asked me if I wanted to be a contributing writer, and I said, sure. So that's how I started writing. Then they asked me if I wanted to be a assistant editor, and I did that, and it was, I wrote for him and edited for him for about 6 years, I think, and from there, you get published, and then it kind of takes off because people see that you're legit. You've got the byline now, you're between a cover of a magazine, and I was just offered a few pieces and parts here and there to contribute to magazines. So that built my portfolio. Then I, did the button boxes that built my portfolio. And I did some mentoring and that type of thing. A couple years ago, I got a phone call from a really good friend who asked me to co-author a book with him. And we are this close to knowing the destiny of that book. And so I hope I get to come back and talk about that when that happens.
Oh
But
yeah, sure.
none of that would have happened had I not just taken the plunge and said, I'm done doing this career. I have to reorganize my life and take the plunge. And then those
Right,
right people along the way to encourage me. So
right.
that's how I got into freelancing. And, I could do a lot more than what I'm doing. But right now I'm focusing on that book project. But I've done some copywriting and editing and proofreading and that kind of thing. So that keeps me busy on the kind of on the side. So yeah.
And the reason I ask you about that was because I've done some freelance writing myself. I think I've hit a wall on that because last year, um, the company I was working for, their budget, they didn't have the money to pay the writer, so we couldn't write the content.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it wasn't it was yeah, it's been almost a year now, and so since I've worked for them, and then I've done some editing because I took a couple of editing courses in 2021, and then last year I edited for Celebrate Lit Publishing. I did some editing for them,
Oh,
but
good.
yeah. But now, and I asked the Lord, I said, "What is your heart for my editing business?" Because I felt like He called me to do it. He said, "Finish the task I've set before you, which means this book." So, yes, I do freelance writing. Yes, I want to be able to earn a little bit more money, but
Sure.
He's got me on this path, on this project. This book, He wants it out in the hands of readers.
Yeah.
This thing has gone through so many drafts, and some of you have heard this, but I'm going to share it again because I do have some milestones, and I'm going to celebrate the milestones. I'm actually, as we are recording this, in the midst of the line edits. Um, yeah, because I did the first round of revisions last week, as we're recording this. So, um, so, and that's what the Lord said, you know, said, finish to complete the task I've set before you. And He keeps telling me, write the vision to make it plain. Not only did I finish that, but um, I also have written down my basic idea for the cover.
Oh,
Shadows
good.
on the Wall. I'm not going to reveal that yet because if I do that, that would spoil it. And I don't want to do that. That's going to have to wait until the publishing process when the cover gets revealed. But I
Yeah.
do have a basic idea. And when I get these ideas, of course I can't see the colors, but it's like I'm sitting there and it's as if I could touch the image that He gives me. It's like the object is the image for the cover is in front of me and I can
Yeah.
almost reach out and touch it. That's
Oh,
how vivid it is.
that's great. Isn't that fun when everything
Yes.
clicks and you just know you're like, yep, I hear you. Thank you
Yep.
for the messages
Oh
because
yeah.
and everything's in his time. So
Mhm.
your editing business will pick up after you're done with this book,
Right.
obviously.
Obviously, yeah, but I think a lot of the editing too, it gave me experience to do my own edits because
Right.
and I've edited for a friend of mine. And I'm going to edit a picture book for her. But He gave me the experience that I needed to do my own edits before I send it out to betas, before
Sure.
I send it to a publisher. I'm not saying it has to be perfect. Done is better than perfect, folks.
Yeah, at
Seriously.
this point, definitely. And like you said, you'll send it out to people, let them help you with that. Because
Mhm.
that first read, they might catch things that your experienced eyes may not catch because you're so familiar with your
Right.
manuscript. Yeah,
Right, I get too close to it, and I may think it's good, but then the reader may say, "No, you need to change this plot thing here," or "Your pacing is off," that
yeah,
kinda thing. That's what I really look for is, the pacing, would it make sense to a young reader?
yeah,
Which I think it would, but, is it too wordy? Is there something that I've written that kids wouldn't do? Things like that, and that's why I wanna get a couple of kids to read it too. Um, but that's one of the things when God gives you something. I have been known to try to do too many things and be all over the place. So yeah, when God gives you something, you kind of have to stick to that.
yeah. You got to listen because if you get that message and it's loud and clear,
Hmm.
he gives us the tools, but he also gives us those nudges along the way. But again, you always know that you're gonna know if it's wrong. That's that gut instinct, right? That he gave us.
Yes, because it's gonna be
Yeah,
if it's wrong.
you're gonna know.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a battle for you to do it. I had a point in my writing where I was gonna have one of my characters, be really really mad and really, but no. He said, "No, you have to teach. She has to find forgiveness." And because I hadn't figured on that, because I was gonna take that part out, it was a struggle. And then I came to realize, wait a minute, no, I can't do this. So and then once I figured it out, I was like writing for like 3 hours that day.
Yeah. It's so weird that you write and it's like your brain goes in a different direction. And of course, I believe that's God speak, right? You
Hmm.
write it and you think this character is going to do something, and then all of a sudden they do something different, and you're like, okay, I'll keep writing. Let's work that out. Let's play it out. Let's see what happens. And it ends up being fantastic, but it was an idea you hadn't thought of before
Hmm.
you started writing that day. And then you do sit down for those 3 hour sessions and get it out.
Yeah,
So
because I was like, I'm gonna go outside and brainstorm. Nope, nope, you ain't leaving
nope.
this chair. We're not done.
And that's why writers need to remember to get up and stretch and exercise too,
Yep.
because when we get in our chairs for too long and get going, a whole day can go by. So
Oh
that's
yeah,
when you know
it
it's
really
right,
can.
though.
Yeah, it is. And then even in the editing process, it's like, no, you need to tweak this here. You need to tweak that there. And sometimes, like, God allows our characters to speak to us,
Oh, yeah.
I believe.
Oh, I totally believe that too.
Yeah.
We are just the conduit for those characters. We're just the ones that
Hmm.
get their story out.
We're the
And
vessel. We're the hands and feet for them. They're the ones telling the story.
yeah, and I say that to people who don't write, and they're like, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I hear voices in my
I'm,
head, but that's
I'm,
okay. They're my characters
uh,
in my books."
I'm weird, but that's okay. Or my daughter will tell me, "You're weird." I'm like, "Thank you." I used to hate that. I used to didn't like. Well, I don't want to use the word hate. I used to didn't like that because I thought, "Oh my gosh, they think I'm crazy." No, but now I embrace my weirdness, and my daughter says, "You're weird." I said, "Thank you."
Yeah, it
I'm
just
home.
creative and passionate.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, that's good.
Yep.
Good, good.
So
I'll be excited to read your book.
yeah, thank you. So, do you have any tips or takeaways you want to share?
For writers, I think it's just that persistence and to believe in yourself. And if you are having a moment where you don't believe in your talent or your ability, or if you're on the right track, really put it out to God and he'll let you know. It's always good to communicate with people that you trust too, and they can encourage you and you've got cheerleaders in your life and they want to help cheer you on. So just don't feel alone in the process. There's a lot of people in the world that want to share their journey. And that's why this podcast is so amazing, is that you are giving people a platform to share their journey because their story matters. And I'm a firm believer that everybody has a story. So anyway, if you're writing, just be persistent, don't give up. Um, Reach out to people for advice, join writer groups, get an accountability coach. But obviously put your faith out there too, because that's going to be a guide for you. That's that you're going to know you're not alone and you're doing the right thing if you just open up yourself to listen to those messages. So, but the world needs good books and good articles and good things to read. So, if you want to write, do it.
Right. So now, what books, when you were writing your book, I have to ask this because because my friend Jen Lowry, who serves as an author coach, because I'm in a group with her,
Mhm.
and she's a publisher, and she talks about this all the time. So, what books did you write? Did you read to get inspiration, or to use as comp titles for your book? And comp means comparable. Like, is this book similar to such and such? Like, for example, The Girl Who Looked Beyond the Stars meets She's Still Here, for example. I mean, now there's two books that I've read. Um, but those are what comp titles are for those of you who are not familiar, because I've been learning a lot about this myself. But what books did you find that were comparable to the button boxes?
Wow, I wish I had a better memory, but of course, as a kid, I read a lot of like um books like by Judy Blume,
Oh
and
yeah.
she's one of my favorite authors. And so maybe there's a little bit of that coming of age or learning the lesson type of thing that her
Hmm.
books gave us as readers. One of my favorite books is The Glass Sentence, and I am forgetting the author's name, which I feel terrible about that. But I read that book at the same time I was writing, and it's that magical realism where it's something that's real that it becomes a magical item, and it is a great book. And of course, I read a little bit of James Patterson's those books about the kids.
Oh, the
And
Maximum Ride, and yeah.
yeah, and then there's the like my I had Al Capone does my laundry or whatever it is. I can put together a list. I'm just not thinking right now.
No, that's
Um,
fine. But I just wanted to know one that stood
yeah,
out. The Glass Sentence. I gotta look that up.
I can look it up real quick if you want me to. I feel terrible. Poor
No,
author
that's
is
fine.
like,
That's fine. I can actually look that up later because I may want to download that for myself to
yeah, good.
get a comp title there. Thank you. That's a good start for me. That I'm
Yeah.
picking your brains as it is.
Pick away. Whatever's there is open for you to use. It's a little shaky up there nowadays, but
Yeah. Some days I'm like that too, but still, um, last sentence. I gotta remember that. But so, um, where can people find you online?
I have a website, templekinyon.com, and there are links to my social media there. However, I typically hang out on Instagram as just an Idaho girl, and then my Facebook is Temple Kinyon Writer. That's my writer page. I don't
Okay.
do a lot of Twitter, and that doesn't, nothing against Twitter. I just only have so much time. And
Mm-hmm.
Facebook and Insta are usually where I'm at. That's where I'll post anything to do with my writing.
Okay.
And people are welcome to go out on my website. I have links to my articles and some, pieces and parts that I'm writing, that kind of stuff. So they can reach out. And if anybody wants any, advice or anything like that, they can reach out. I will definitely share this because this is such a great podcast. And again, I appreciate you taking the time to put people's stories out there, especially writers.
Right. So, and I do this for all my Christian based authors. Do you have a Bible verse that you would like to share?
I do. I do. And it's pretty pertinent to our conversation today. It's Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.
I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
So, before we close out in prayer, is there anything else on your heart that you'd like to say today?
I just want everyone to know again how much I appreciate you, Anne, and I've just really enjoyed this opportunity. It's important for people to follow their heart and listen to what God says because He did give us all gifts, and our gifts are to be able to serve Him and live the life that he wants us to live. So have an open mind, have an open heart, put your faith out there, and know you're not alone. And there's people like us that get to connect with each other if we put ourselves out there and take that plunge. That faith over fear is
Yes.
important to keep in mind. So I just appreciate the time. And if anyone's interested in my writing, I sure hope you go out and look, because I hope to continue to do this until I'm not able to do it anymore.
As long as God will let you do it.
Exactly.
So, would you like to close us out in prayer?
I sure can. Thank you. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for gathering us here today and for bringing Anne into my life. She is definitely a special person, I can tell, and important on my writer journey. Um, be sure to be sure to have Anne's listeners especially know that the obstacles and trials that we receive in life only are there to build our strength, and so that we can discover those gifts that you've given us. Um, Everyone has a story that matters, and so live that story as best you can. Thank you for all the blessings that you've given all of us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. So, we challenge you today to go out there and write something inspiring. Remember what I've said, write the vision and make it plain. Read to get inspired first. Write
Right.
something inspiring and share your creation with the world. For when you've touched one life, you've touched thousands. Thanks for joining us on Inspirational Journeys. And remember, your story and your message matters. You guys have a blessed day. Take care. Bye bye.